Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. A reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 6, The Killing of the Demon Putana. Text 43. Nanda Swaputra Madaya Pratyagata Mudadati Murti Upagraya Paramam Mudam Lebe Kurudvaha. Nanda, Maharaj Nanda, Swaputra Madaya, taking his son Krishna on his lap. Precha Agatam, as if Krishna had returned from death. No one could even imagine that from such a danger a child could be saved. Precha Agatam means all of that. Udaradi, because he was always liberal and simple. Murdni, on the head of Krishna. Upagraya, formally smelling. Paramam, highest. Mudam, peace. Lebe, achieved. Kuru Udvaha, O Maharaj Parikshit. Translation. O Maharaj Parikshit, best of the Kurus, Nanda Maharaj was very liberal and simple. He immediately took his son Krishna on his lap, as if Krishna had returned from death. And by formally smelling his son's head, Nanda Maharaj undoubtedly enjoyed transcendental bliss. Please repeat. O Maharaj Parikshit, best of the Kurus, Nanda Maharaj was very liberal and simple. He immediately took his son, Krishna, on his lap, as if Krishna had returned from death. And by formally smelling his son's head, Nanda Maharaj undoubtedly enjoyed transcendental bliss. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Nanda Maharaj could not understand how the inhabitants of his house had allowed Putana to enter the house, nor could he imagine the gravity of the situation. He did not understand that Krishna had wanted to kill Putana and that his pastimes were performed by Yoga Maya. Nanda Maharaj simply thought that someone had entered his house and created havoc. This was Nanda Maharaj's simplicity. Translation again. O Maharaj Parikshit, best of the Kurus, Nanda Maharaj was very liberal and simple. He immediately took his son Krishna on his lap, as if Krishna had returned from death. And by formally smelling his son's head, Nanda Maharaj undoubtedly enjoyed transcendental bliss. By formally smelling his head. So I was wondering what informally smelling his head was. I guess as a general rule, fathers are more likely to formally smell their children's head, and mothers are probably more likely to informally smell their children's head. I don't actually remember ever smelling my son's head, actually, but there you go. Wow, so I missed that one. Oh, if it's done formally. Oh, as a sanskar. Okay, thank you. So there you go. So all you brahmacharis in the audience, there's a very, very useful piece of information. I guess that's what's happened to my sons. I didn't formally smell their heads. Okay, so this, of course, is the chapter of the killing of the demon Putana. But it was interesting there in the purport at the very, or actually in the translation and the purport, but that Nanda Maharaj was very liberal and simple. Defining those words, maybe we won't get into defining the word liberal. We could be here all day. Prabhupada gave a nice definition of the term simple, or a nice sutra about the word simple, and he said simple for the simple and complicated for the crooked. We also have other little sayings like that, that it's very hard, once you tell lies, it's very hard to remember them. Actually, it's quite hard to remember anything, particularly as you get older, just for all of you younger persons in the room. It gets hard to remember anything as you get older. But it's definitely easier to remember the truth because it actually happened and you're more likely to remember it. But yeah, they say it's very difficult to remember lies, so once you start lying, your life can become quite complicated. And also, there's another phrase that says, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when at first we begin to deceive." So again, if you take that analogy in the context of a web, a spider's web, we know that once an insect gets into a spider's web, it becomes, and the more they try to extricate themselves, the more they get entangled in it, like that. So oh what a tangled web we weave when at first we begin to deceive. So simple for the simple and complicated for the crooked. But just on the liberal theme, Prabhupada was so liberal, actually, that he came. We're celebrating now the 50th anniversary of the beginning of ISKCON. So we're celebrating that. And the reason that we're celebrating that is because Prabhupada came from the West, from India to the West in 1965. What a liberal thing to do at the age of 70. What an incredibly liberal thing to do at the age of 70. Idam stanam parityajya videsham gamyate maya. There's a nice verse that's quoted by Bhakti Devi to Narada Muni. And Bhakti Devi is saying, and I'm not sure exactly when that quote was, some of you may know, but it was eons ago that this reference was made. And Bhakti Devi is saying that I will leave this place, Vrindavan, and I will bring the message of Bhagavatam to the whole planet, to the whole world, like that. Now, I'm not scholarly enough to know exactly what Bhakti Devi did in that particular manifestation, but for sure we know that Srila Prabhupada did that. So many eons afterwards that Srila Prabhupada did that. And we talk about Prabhupada when he came, that he carried with him so many different things, a little bit of grain, $6, although Prabhupada's at the festival in Calcutta, or Kolkata, sorry. Where is it? The Netaji Stadium. That big festival that was there, wonderful, wonderful festival. Some devotees were there that are sitting here, Ganesham Prabhu, Bhakti Churu Maharaj, etc. Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj was there. Wonderful, wonderful festival. And Prabhupada's son spoke. And he said that when they were on Kidapur dock, just as Prabhupada was about to leave, Prabhupada gave his son 40 rupees. But that's what we understand Prabhupada took with him to America. So now we're not sure, did Prabhupada have 80 rupees and he split it down the middle and gave half to his son? Or did he only had 40 rupees and he gave it all to his son and he brought nothing to America? Now we're all confused. Somebody wrote to me in the context of the Dandavat's website and they said, this is a big scandal. You have to expose it on Dandavat. What? Whether Prabhupada took 80 rupees or 40 rupees to America with him? Yes, this is very important. All my life I've believed he took, Anyway, okay. So, But the other thing that Prabhupada took with him, whether he took 80 rupees or 40 rupees, one thing that we do know that he took with him to the West was he took trunks of Bhagavatams with him. They came. So it's very interesting in this context of this verse quoted by Bhakti Devi to Narada Muni, that here's Prabhupada, he's bringing Bhagavatam to the West with him. And not only that, but when Prabhupada arrived, one of the first things he did, at least as soon as he had established a center or centers, was he established the morning Srimad Bhagavatam class every morning. And we do that every morning in every Hare Krishna temple around the world. Now I think we have something in the region of 700 temples around the world. So, 700 times a day, the Srimad Bhagavatam class is recited and spoken among the devotees. So, quite an amazing thing, that this quote that goes back so long, and Prabhupada actually is fulfilling that. Quite amazing. And then in terms of his liberality, he came, and then he saw that devotees were struggling to, I don't know actually, I need to study that a little bit more. I don't know if he noticed they were struggling or he just concluded they would struggle, but to chant 64 rounds a day, and Prabhupada reduced it to 16 rounds a day. Again, how liberal is that? Incredibly liberal. Yet, some people would see Prabhupada as conservative. So that's why not much point getting into the definition of the term liberal. But here in this section of the Bhagavatam that we're reading now, it's just so interesting, because the theme today, I was given a theme today, by the way. I heard Kadamba Kandamar speaking yesterday, and he said that his theme was integrity, and I heard him speaking, and he said that, he didn't want to be, not that he didn't want to be, he said he finds it confining being locked into a subject of integrity. He seemed to be struggling. So I'll probably find the same in relation to simplicity, being locked into that. But today's subject is simplicity, or theme is simplicity, and how Nanda Maharaj was very simple. And in relation to that, it says that he didn't understand, Nanda Maharaj wasn't aware of how Yogamaya was acting in this whole kind of pastime. So in that sense, he was very simple. And Putana, she'd entered Krishna's bedroom. She had no invite. She had no invitation to enter Krishna's bedroom. She just entered it uninvited, an uninvited guest. Nothing worse than an uninvited guest, particularly if it's Putana. But she entered uninvited. She had no permission to do that. So she came in. Now, the thing is, she thought she was being crafty. But was she being crafty? Absolutely not. She wasn't being crafty at all. Was she being set up? Absolutely, she was being set up. So that's a very simple point. She thought she was being crafty. She wasn't. She was being stupid. And she was being set up by Krishna like that. And it also makes reference in this chapter that if there's no Krishna consciousness, then Rakshasas and Rakshasis, they can thrive if there's no Krishna consciousness. But because Krishna was in Gokul, Krishna was present in Gokul, then all that Putana could accept, all that Putana, in that situation, she's entered uninvited, etc., all that Putana could accept was her own death. That was the only conclusion of all of this. She could just accept her own death. So again, very simple. She'd come in uninvited. She thought she was being clever. She wasn't being clever. She was being set up, essentially, by Krishna. So very simple. All that happened was that she was going to die. Yogamaya also ensured that both Rohini and Yashoda, again, by Yogamaya's potency, that they didn't object to Putana breastfeeding Krishna. They had no objection to that. So again, very simple point, that Yogamaya just, what word should I use? I should be careful of the word that I use. But anyway, Yashoda and Rohini didn't object like that. And then she took Krishna on her lap, started to breastfeed. As we know, there was poison on her breast, and that was she was trying to kill Krishna with that. But Krishna sucked everything, whatever, and she received her fate. Very, very simple. Krishna actually in that age, from 0 to 5, the Kaumara age, he killed 3 demons, and Putana was the first demon, which is an interesting point. Putana was the first demon that Krishna killed, and of course, as we know, Putana represents fake gurus. That's what Putana represents, fake gurus. So I guess we can conclude that given that was the first demon that Krishna decided to kill, that's a very important point that we should take from the pastime, to be careful of fake gurus giving bhukti, material sense gratification, and mukti, liberation. And we should avoid that at all costs. Because Srila Prabhupada says it again in this part of the Bhagavatam, in this particular chapter, Srila Prabhupada also says that here in India, he specifies in India, we know that the West is Maya. Srila Prabhupada also said the further west you go, the more Maya you encounter. So just to balance what I'm going to say next. But Srila Prabhupada also says that here in India, there are still putanas. There are still mystical witches who get on their brooms. You know, when I was a kid, there was a television show, kids show on the television, and I forget what it was called. It was HR Puffin Stuff. I don't know if anybody in this room remembers HR Puffin Stuff, but that was a kids program that I grew up with. And one of the biggest characters in HR Puffin Stuff was a witch who used to get on a broom and fly away. And of course, we just thought that was just, mythical. It didn't actually happen. But Srila Prabhupada says, here in India, there are still witches that exist in part of India who get on their broom and they can fly to outer space. So we all need to be beware, because they're representing fake gurus giving bhakti and mukti. So I think we all need to be aware of those, putanas flying above us on the witches. And maybe that's not so simple. Maybe that's not so. It's simple that it's happening, but maybe it's not so simple for us to make sure that we don't fall foul of that. But Prabhupada also says, however, if one is attached to Krishna, even as an enemy, even if you're attached to Krishna as an enemy, then you'll be liberated. You'll be liberated. So what then of devotees? In the Bhagavad Gita, the Anicham Sukham Lokam verse, where Prabhupada's explaining that, even the lowborn, etc., if they take shelter of Krishna, they can attain the highest destination. And then the next verse says, what to speak of the devotees who approach him in love like that, they can naturally achieve the highest destination very, very easily. And Sukadeva Goswami, again in this particular part of the Bhagavatam, is quoting the Shravanam Kirtanam Maranam verse, and that wherever that's taking place, or wherever we're engaged in those pastimes, enemies cannot penetrate us, they cannot have any impact on us whatsoever. We're completely protected from all bad elements. So again, the theme being simplicity. Also in the fourth canto, this is the 10th canto, of course, but we were talking about the fourth canto yesterday, so I have the fourth canto on my mind. But in the fourth canto, I think, isn't it, where Lord Vishnu is talking to Prithu Maharaj, and he's saying to him that no matter of all the austerities you may perform, of all the penances that you may perform, that ultimately they're useless unless you develop good qualities. And then Prabhupada in the purport, he lists all the good qualities, the 26 qualities of a devotee. And the 9th one being simple or simplicity. Sometimes Prabhupada says simplicity, sometimes it's listed as simple. That's one of the 26 qualities of a devotee. And then Prabhupada expands on that and starts talking about the real key to being simple. He quotes the Ishavasham Idam Savam verse and the Bhaktaram Yagyatapasham verse, and is explaining that we shouldn't become attached, and particularly we shouldn't become attached to material possessions. We should live our life very, very simple, because the more things that we have, the more things we have to give up. And as I'm sure you all know, giving up things is never easy. Giving up things is never easy. Ultimately, we were talking last night at Prashadam, I was talking with a couple of devotees, Madhu Sevada Prabhu and Brajbihari Prabhu, and we were talking about death. Madhu Sevada Prabhu was telling us that there's a Christian order in Italy, monks, a Christian order, and they have, just like we have our regulative principles, one of the regulative principles that they have is that every time they meet each other, and of course they meet each other many, many times, walking past and whatever, doing their daily activities, every time they meet each other, the first one to speak has to say, "Brother, we're going to die." And the other brother responds, "Yes, brother, we're going to die." So they're remembering death, maybe in a slightly morbid way, but they're certainly remembering it. But we were just discussing that, this is it. We're here in the material world. We chose to come here, And, that's something we have to face. And Prabhu gives that example, of course, a lovely example that we may be completely afraid of, a lion or a tiger, but for the lion and tiger's children, the cubs, the tiger will, or the lion will grab the cub by the scruff of the neck in its mouth, and the cub is completely feeling protected like that. So Prabhu connects that with that if we're free, if we're engaged in devotional service, and we've become free from our anartas and free from all the attachments that this material world throws at us or gives us, and of course, attachment to the body, attachment to the mind, attachment to the false ego, they're very, very powerful attachments, extremely powerful attachments. Mai sarvani karmani sanyashatma chetaza nirashir nirmama bhutva yujasva shwagata vala bridava. Yeah. That surrendering all your works unto me, Arjuna, giving up your attachment, giving up everything, possessions, wealth, all the different things that's listed in that verse that Krishna's asking Arjuna to give up, that's how we become liberated, but liberated in the context of attaining Krishna's lotus feet. But, it's something that we have to work on and we have to meditate on. It doesn't actually come automatically. It's something that we do have to work at. And, we have to surrender one way or the other. We have to surrender. Either we surrender to Maya, Krishna's external energy, which on one level is a very easy thing to do. Surrendering to Maya in one sense is a very easy thing to do. But the result of that is we suffer. That's what happens. We suffer. Nothing but suffering. It comes from surrendering to Maya. Or we surrender to Krishna, which on one level, as residents of the material realm, is a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder to surrender to Krishna. But if we do surrender to Krishna, we experience nothing but bliss, nothing but happiness, nothing but positive things, nothing but auspiciousness if we surrender to Krishna. But as I say, living in the material world, surrendering to Maya is much easier. It's just much easier. And these bodies we carry around, and the mind that we carry around, and the false ego that we carry around, and we know the descriptions of the false ego. We take the material coverings of the universe. So we have the earth covering, which is, what is that? That's 4 million or 4 billion miles, the earth covering. 4 million or 4 billion? Million? So it's 4 million. Okay, I'll trust you. Okay, 4 million wide. And then each material covering after that is 10 times wider than the previous one. So, mental arithmetic was never really my strong point, but the next one is going to be 40 million miles. Earth water is going to be 40. Earth water air 400 is going to be air with air fire is going to be 400. Next one is 4 billion then, right? 4 billion and then 10 and 40 billion, and it goes on mind, intelligence, false ego, whatever the end, what's the end one? Okay. So very, 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 very thick. And that last one is the false ego. How amazing is that? Let's put a rough calculation on it of, what do we say, 40, 400, 4 billion, 40 billion, 400 billion, what? Trillion. Let's say a trillion. We're settling on a trillion just for convenience, unless someone has the Bhagavad Gita there in front of them. We're settling on a trillion. 1 trillion miles thick is your false ego. Mine's only a couple of miles, actually, because I've been burrowing away for the last few years, so I'm getting through it. No, so it's 1 trillion miles thick. To think that we can do that on our own, somehow or other get through all those coverings, through the false ego's coverings, to then just enter the beginning of the spiritual realm, it's inconceivable, it's impossible, it's not doable. We can only do it by the mercy of the devotees and the mercy of Krishna. But at least we should be aware of that challenge that faces us, that we don't become, that's the next one, isn't it? Was that Trinavarta? That laxity and complacency, that's Trinavarta's anarta that he's representing. So laxity and complacency, how easy it is to become lax and complacent at anything in life. Absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be spiritual life. It can be anything in material life too. The tendency for us when we're doing something, engaged in something for any length of time, we become complacent. We become lax. It becomes run-of-the-mill. We think, it's no problem. I don't have to prepare for that. I don't have to work on that. I'll just do that. I've done that before. So what to speak of spiritual life like that? So, or like pigeons, when I was a little boy, some weird reason, I had pigeons at one time. these homing pigeons. Don't ask me why I did that, but I did that when I was about 10 or 11 or something. And it's quite amazing, it's quite amazing. They always come back. I had a pigeon one time. I don't know what happened to him because, you can't have a conversation with them. So you actually don't know what happened. But, it took him about 7 months to, or her, that was something else I never figured out, who was a he and who was a she, pigeon in the pigeon world, But anyway, it took him or her about 7 months to come back, but it came back. I thought, wow, it came back. Now I know what happened to it. Did it find itself in some pigeon society and it, stole someone's corn and it got arrested and went to court and it got a 7-month jail sentence in the pigeon world? I'm not really sure what happened to that pigeon. But the point was it still came back after 7 months like that. So, Abrahma Bhuvana Loka, that we shouldn't keep coming back. Because what's the pigeon doing when you think about it? The pigeon's coming back to this, I came from a humble background, I had a little rinky-dinky shed in the back of my garden, and at the end of the garden, and at the end of the garden was a rinky-dinky shed, that was about, it was no bigger from me to Garanga and me to this Prabhu, just a little square like that. That was a big, and I had about like 30 pigeons in it, so basically it was a prison cell that they had, but it comes back to the prison cell like that. So, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't be sucked into that thing of coming back to the prison house of the material world and use our intelligence to engage without laxity and without complacency in the process of Krishna consciousness so that we can free ourselves from this. Prabhupada says in one purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam, always struck me really, really powerfully. He just said, blanket, there is no happiness at all in the material world. There is no happiness at all in the material world. That's quite an amazing statement. We came here, by the way. That's another amazing thing. We came here. We came to the material world. Now, why did we come here? To a place that has no happiness at all. Why did we choose to do that? It was free will. And we just came to a place that has no happiness at all. It's quite amazing. Why did we do that? Why did we come to a place that has no happiness at all? But that's what Prabhupada says, no happiness at all. Of course, he gives the examples of, the sweet rice with the sand in, etc. And those are examples that we think there is some kind of happiness. But ultimately, there is zero happiness in the material world. So there was no reason to come here in the first place. And there's absolutely no reason to stay here, because we're just going to suffer. Another reference that Prabhupada talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, actually I think in the 16th chapter, he talks about the austerity of satisfaction. The austerity of satisfaction. Now, for most of us, well, I'll speak for myself, for me, satisfaction doesn't sound like a bad thing. Being satisfied sounds like a pretty okay thing. I'd much prefer to be satisfied than dissatisfied. So what is the austerity of satisfaction that Prabhupada is talking about? And it's ultimately there is no satisfaction. It's just fleeting. Whatever satisfaction you feel or you receive at some point in time, it disappears very, very quickly, and it's replaced with all sorts of other things. So, the message here is a very simple message. Maharaj Nanda is displaying that simplicity, that he had no idea, and therefore, and that's another nice thing actually, that sometimes we know too much. Life becomes too complicated. We can know too much. Sometimes it's very good to keep things simple and straightforward and focused, rather than getting things to. So Nanda Maharaj here, he had no idea what Yogamaya was doing, so his life was very, very simple. And when you think about it, and therefore, he's part of Krishna's pastimes, keeping things very simple. He's part of Krishna's transcendental pastimes, and essentially experiencing nothing but bliss. But if we complicate things, and you see in the material world, people really complicate things. And when we look at, right now, of course, in Mayapur, we're building the temple of the Vedic planetarium. And it was a project that Prabhupada really, really was so desirous of. It's even, many devotees will make the point that it's really one of the 5 key projects that Prabhupada wanted to establish in ISKCON, the temple of the Vedic planetarium. And then you ask why? Why did Prabhupada want to do that? And one reason was he wanted to show the material world as it is, and the creation of the material world, the cosmos, how it was created. He wanted to show that from the Vedic perspective and as it is. because there's no understanding, there's practically no understanding of that reality, particularly outside of India, but even within India, there's very little real understanding of that. And that was such a big thing that Prabhupada wanted to do, to challenge the atheistic view of the world. And atheists, of course, really complicate things. They're people that really complicate things, not least because, generally speaking, their starting point is that they deny the existence of Krishna. They deny the existence of God. Big complication. What a complication. That's your starting point. How are you going to recover from such a starting point that you're denying the existence of Krishna? So Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish Temple of Vedic Planetarium to show people, including those atheists, how it is. I've spoken on this before, but it's just such a for me, it's such a kind of interesting thing that I read an article, a scientific article written by atheistic scientists. They're not all atheists, but many of them are. But this was written by 3 or 4. It was a conglomeration of views by these 3 or 4 different atheistic scientists. And they wrote this article, and it was a very, very long article. Well, it was a long article. It took me about an hour, I think, to read it. And of course, it takes you longer to read it because of the language that they use. It's kind of like they just throw in all this language that, So, anyway, I read it. But it came to a certain part of it, and they kind of said, they didn't use the word, this is our chatur shloki, but that was what they were inferring. The next 2 sentences are the key 2 sentences of this whole article. And I quite easily memorized them. It wasn't very difficult. And the 2 sentences were, the first sentence was, because they were talking about the creation of the universe, that was the subject that they were talking about. Of course, what caught my attention in the first place to read the article was that the heading of it, or the subheading of it was, religionists or spiritual people have had since time immemorial to give their view on the creation of the universe, while the scientists have hardly got a look in. And my kind of jaw dropped. Huh? Really? Ever since I was a kid, all I can remember is the so-called scientific view of the creation of the universe. I remember when I was in school, I suppose about 13, we had one teacher who was really passionate on this point. Mr. Finn was his name. And he was super passionate on this point about, this was when all the Apollo missions, in the middle of the Apollo missions going to the moon, and they had landed on the moon. Simple for the simple, complicated for the crooked, Was it the Arizona desert? Was it somewhere else? Anyway, it was in the middle of the Apollo missions, and they had landed on the moon. So this teacher was so passionate about this point, and he was saying to us, so I was 13, and we all were working out, what age we'd be for his prediction. And he was saying, don't you see, I'm so envious of you, because you are all so young, and I'm so old. He says, by the turn of the century, so the year 2000, by the turn of the century, you won't be going to Ibiza and Corfu and Crete and Rome. You won't be going to those places for your holidays. You'll be going to the moon for your holidays. There'll be just vacations. Everyone will be going up there, going on their vacations to the moon over there. So I was working out, year 2000, I'll be 39, Now, I haven't reached 39 yet, so it might still happen. So I'll be 39. Unfortunately, I've passed 39, or fortunately. I don't think anyone's gone to the moon for their holidays yet, have they? Any of you in here? Any of you gone to the moon for your holiday? Not that devotees take holidays. I remember that at one time we were on a very popular television show, years and years ago, 1979, very, very popular television show in Dublin, Ireland. And a few devotees were being interviewed. One of those devotees, his name was Davanalahara. Davanalahara. And at one point, the compere, the host, he asked him, he says, you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you do this, and then you work all day. Do you ever take a holiday? And Davanalahara said, actually, we were talking about this yesterday, Marsh. The name of the compere of that show, his name was Gay Byrne. That's his name. It comes from Gabriel. It's short for Gabriel, Gay, A little difficult using that name these days. Has different connotations. But his name was Gay Byrne, and he said to him, he says, the thing is, Gay, when you're enjoying everything you do, every minute, every hour of the day, you don't need to take a holiday. So we don't need to take holidays. However, Most people do. No one has gone to the moon. They don't even talk about going to the moon anymore. Now they talk about sending stuff out to Mars and Pluto and beyond. You know, what happened to colonizing the moon? I mean, it's only there. It's only just a few miles away. You know, why bother with all these other places, billions of miles away, when you just nip up to the moon? You know, it's such, as Prabhupada says, post-dated check. And no one challenges them on it. Hey, what happened to the moon? You know, why don't we go there anymore? Why aren't we? No one challenges them on it. They just get away with it all the time. So going back to the article, these two sentences. The first sentence was, this material universe popped into existence out of nothing. That's the first sentence. This material universe popped into existence out of nothing. And the second sentence, however, because nothing is inherently unstable. Now, I don't know if any of you knew that, but if you didn't, you do now. Nothing is inherently unstable, okay? It's a very important point. Because nothing is inherently unstable, something had to come from it. And what came from it was everything we see in this universe. Isn't that amazing? And people read that because of the way it's written and the word they use, and of course the people who are writing it, and they kind of think, wow, I never knew nothing was unstable. Wow. And it was so unstable that all of this came from it. Wow, that's incredible. These people are incredible. Wow, I'll fall at their feet, you know, and offer them Guru Puja every day. I'll offer them Vyasa Puja every day. So Prabhupada, he wanted the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium created so as that we could present these things from the Vedic perspective and as we understand the actual reality. Now, of course, to be fair to the scientists, just to be fair to them a little bit, Jnanam te savijnanam, that in the 7th chapter, Krishna talks about this. He talks about the noumena behind the phenomena. So, actually, from the phenomenal world perspective, a lot of us, we have a lot in common with the scientists. There isn't actually that much, really. I'm sure there's some things, but we have a lot in common. They accept the material elements, and that a combination of material elements is what is used to create so many things, etc., like that. So from the phenomenal point of view, and the phenomenal just means, in this context, it means what we perceive through our senses, through sight, touch, taste, hearing, etc. Smell, of course, has a theme here today, because it's one of the samskars, to formally smell the baby's head. Remember that, all of you brahmacharis? So the phenomenal world is something that we essentially agree on, because we perceive it through our senses. So that perception that we have through our senses is fairly common for all of us. But to understand the noumena behind the phenomena, you have to have, as Krishna gave Arjuna, he gave him spiritual vision. You have to have at least the theoretical understanding that we receive through Shastra, that there is something behind the phenomenal world. Now, of course, if you have spiritual vision, wow, all the more wonderful. But you at least have some concept of that. You have to have some concept first before you even jump to the spiritual. You have to have some concept on the subtle level, like that. And then the spiritual level. And then you can understand these things, and you can understand the noumena behind the phenomena. But if you have no subtle understanding, what to speak of spiritual understanding, which is actually the case for most people in the material world, most, aside from the devotees, most people in the material world, they're not really engaging on that level in any capacity. They're not engaging on that level. So for scientists to conclude that all of this came from nothing, it's actually quite a logical understanding. It's not illogical. It's quite logical for them to conclude that, because they can't see, they can't perceive it, they can't see it, they can't sense that there's something behind the phenomenal world. So in one sense, much better that we have some sympathy for them, rather than, just at every opportunity blasting them. Because if we can reach some agreement with them on the level of the phenomenal world, and that they can have some level of faith or confidence in what we're saying about the phenomenal world, they'll be much more likely to then gradually start accepting the concepts that we can give them as it relates to the noumena behind the phenomena like that. So, but anyway, it's still, the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, I'm assuming, of course I'm relatively closely connected with it because I serve in Mayapur, that it's going to be so, because that's another reality as well, another phenomena, a different kind of phenomena, but that when we see something really spectacular, we get impressed by it. So in the main temple, we're going to have this incredible chandelier that's hanging down from the very top of the dome right down to just a few feet, I think, above the main altar. And it will be showing all the different dhams like that. So that's going to be pretty impressive when people see that, and they'll want to learn more, they'll want to understand more. And then in one of the actual separate domes, the temple, the actual Vedic Planetarium dome, there will be numerous, many different presentations on different aspects of the Krishna conscious philosophy, particularly as it relates to scientific presentations like that. But of course, Nanda Maharaj, he didn't have to worry about any of that because he was very simple, very straightforward. He just smelt his son's head formally, and Yoga Maya protected him from understanding what Putana's true mission was. So Putana was able to enter into Krishna's bedroom like that, and all that wonderful pastime took place. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. I don't know what time we're going to go. There's 5 minutes more, so if we have any question or comment, one maybe, or we can take one. And if we don't, we will just end. Okay. Oh, Kavichandra Maharaj. You got in the nick of time. You got in at the death. Brother, okay. we are going to...
I have nothing to say. That sentence, nothing is inherently unstable, is interesting because then it could mean that everything is stable.
Absolutely.
There was one scientist speaking, and he said everything came from nothing at some conference. And somebody asked him, what is nothing? And he said, nothing is something. And they just laughed him out of the place. But they have like 25 pages of mathematical formulas.
As to what is what nothing is.
To define nothing. And then if you say, well, that doesn't make sense, they say, well, you're not educated enough. And the Buddhist also, a devotee told me, or a boy told me, he said, they write so many books about nothing. I said,
well, that's nothing. Yeah, what is nothing? What is this nothing? Of course, it's not nothing. It's air and whatever molecules are in that. Like, what is nothing? It's actually a daft concept.
No thing.
No thing.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a nice class.
Anyway, as long as we understand, though, that it's inherently unstable. And you never know what might come from it. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.